Rain dripped endlessly against the wide glass windows of a small diner at the corner of Maple Street. It was one of those gray mornings where the world felt cold, tired, and half asleep. Inside, the scent of freshly brewed coffee hung in the air, mingling with the faint sound of jazz playing from an old radio. That's when the door opened, the bell above it chiming softly, and in walked an old man whose clothes looked as though they had seen far better days. His coat was torn at the sleeves, his shoes worn to the sole, and his face carried the kind of quiet fatigue only years of loneliness could etch into a person. People glanced briefly, then looked away. Only one person didn't. Her name was Emily. She was 25, a waitress who worked double shifts to pay her mother's medical bills and her younger brother's school fees. Despite her exhaustion, she always smiled, because she believed that kindness, even in small doses, mattered. When she saw the old man sit alone in the booth by the window, shivering slightly as the rain streamed down his shoulders, something inside her stirred. She didn't see a stranger. She saw someone's father, someone's grandparent, someone who just needed warmth. Before we go any further, if you believe that small acts of kindness can create ripples of love across the world, please take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps stories like this reach more hearts. Emily walked over with a gentle smile, holding her small notepad close. The old man barely looked up. His voice, when he finally spoke, was low and rough, "Just a coffee, please." She noticed how his fingers trembled slightly when he reached for the menu. "No food, just coffee." She nodded quietly and went to place the order. When the steaming cup arrived, she brought it to his table herself, placing it before him with care. "Here you go, sir," she said softly. He murmured a thank you, his eyes never leaving the cup. Emily noticed how he sipped it slowly, almost as if savoring not just the taste but the feeling of being seen. He sat there for nearly an hour, just watching the rain and staring into the dark reflection of the window. When it came time for the bill, she saw him reach into his pocket, fumbling awkwardly. He pulled out a few coins and an old wallet, shaking his head slightly, embarrassed. She could see there wasn't enough. Without hesitation, Emily smiled and whispered, "Don't worry about it. Coffee's on me today." He looked at her, startled, his tired eyes suddenly clearer. "No, I couldn't," he began, but she waved him off. "It's okay. Just, stay warm." She turned quickly before he could protest again and returned to the counter. What Emily didn't know, what no one in that diner knew, was that the old man wasn't who he seemed. His name was Charles Beaumont, and he was one of the most successful yet reclusive billionaires in the state. For years, he had built empires, real estate, technology, and finance, but after losing his wife, he had slowly withdrawn from the world. That morning, disguised in worn clothes, he had left his mansion to see the world from the ground again. He wanted to remind himself of what truly mattered. He wanted to find real kindness, not the kind people showed when they knew his name, but the kind that came freely, without expectation. And now, sitting in that tiny diner, with the warmth of a simple cup of coffee and the gesture of a stranger's heart, he found what he had been searching for. Emily's life wasn't easy. After her shift ended, she walked home in the same rain that had soaked the old man's coat. The lights of the city flickered on as she hurried through puddles, clutching her worn umbrella that barely held together. At home, her mother lay in bed, pale but smiling when Emily entered. Her younger brother, Sam, ran to hug her, showing her the math test he had aced. "I knew you'd be proud," he grinned. She hugged him tighter. Dinner that night was simple, soup and bread, but their laughter filled the room. Emily didn't tell them about the man she had helped. To her, it wasn't anything special. Just something small to make someone's day a little better. The next morning, as she returned to work, she noticed something strange. A black car was parked outside the diner, sleek, expensive, with tinted windows. Inside, two men in suits were talking quietly. She brushed it off and began her shift. But an hour later, one of them walked in, scanning the diner before approaching her. "Are you Emily?" he asked. She nodded, unsure. He handed her a white envelope sealed with gold embossing. "Mr. Beaumont wanted you to have this." She frowned. "Mr. Beaumont?" she repeated, confused. The man only smiled politely. "You'll understand soon." When she opened the envelope after her shift, her hands trembled. Inside was a handwritten letter and a check for $50,000. The letter read. Emily stood frozen in the empty diner, the rain once again tapping softly against the glass. Her heart pounded. She didn't know whether to cry or smile. $50,000, it was more than she could have ever imagined. It meant paying off hospital bills, helping her brother go to college, and maybe, just maybe, having a chance to chase her dream of opening her own cafe one day. But what touched her most wasn't the money. It was the message, that kindness, no matter how small, mattered. The story didn't end there. Weeks later, news spread across the town. Billionaire Charles Beaumont had announced a new charitable foundation, the Ripple of Love Fund, dedicated to supporting people who showed genuine acts of compassion. The diner where Emily worked became famous overnight, and when reporters came, she tried to hide from the cameras, embarrassed by the attention. When she finally met Mr. Beaumont again, he wasn't dressed in rags this time. He looked dignified, but his eyes carried the same warmth she had seen that rainy morning. He thanked her in person and invited her to help manage a new cafe project funded by his foundation, one that would train and employ struggling single parents and students. She accepted, though she could barely believe it was real. Months turned into years, and Emily's small act continued to ripple outward. The cafe she helped build became a place of hope for many, where the homeless could eat without shame, where tired souls could find kindness with their coffee. The walls were decorated with photos of real people whose lives had been touched through the fund. And right near the entrance hung a framed message in elegant script. Emily would sometimes stand near that sign, lost in thought, remembering that rainy day. She had never done it for recognition or reward. She had simply followed her heart, and that, she realized, was what made all the difference. Mr. Beaumont often visited, quietly sitting by the same window where it had all begun. They didn't talk much about the past. They didn't need to. Between them existed an unspoken understanding, that compassion is the real wealth of life, the one currency that never loses its value. One evening, long after closing, Emily sat in the empty cafe, staring out at the drizzle-lit streets. Her mother was healthy now. Sam was studying engineering at university. The cafe was thriving. For the first time in years, she felt peace, not the peace that comes from comfort, but the kind that comes from knowing you've made the world a little gentler. As she turned off the lights, she whispered softly, "Thank you," not knowing if she was speaking to the old man, to fate, or to the universe itself. Maybe to all three. Sometimes, the smallest gestures, like buying a stranger a cup of coffee, can open doors to miracles you never see coming. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Every story we share is a reminder that even the simplest acts of love can change someone's life forever.